right there, AP Latin. Here we go. Vergil, Book 1, line 157 to line 209. So get that done. Here we go. So the exhausted Aeneidans, followers of Aeneas, they struggle to seek shores which are closest to them on their course. And they are driven to the ports of Italy, not yet, of Libya, the coasts of Libya. And there is a spot in a long inlet. An island creates a port with the projection of its sides, with which every wave from the deep sea is broken. So it just like has super calm waters, right? And it splits itself into recessed bays. So when we're discussing this, ask me to draw it, and I probably will. From this side and from that, huge crags, huge rocks, and twin cliffs pushing up into the sky, a large tower, beneath the summit of which the safe waters are silent, both far and wide. And then from above there, a grove of quivering woods, there's a place with a grove of quivering woods, and a black grove overhangs with its bristling shade. Under the opposite face, there's a cave made out of suspended stone. So in other words, it's part of the rock face. It doesn't come up from under the water. And within there, sweet waters and seats are made out of the living rock. I would say almost like piers or docks are made out of the living rock. The home of the nymphs. Here, no chains hold exhausted ships. Here, no anchor holds them with its hooked bite. In other words, the water's so calm you don't have to do those things. Aeneas enters this place with 7 ships which he had gathered from his entire number, which I think was 20, and going ashore, disembarking, egressi, having gone off. The Trojans take possession of the longed-for sand with a great love of the land. In other words, they collapse onto the ground, and they're like, oh, thank God. And they set their bodies, which are dripping with salt, onto the shore. So they just plop down. They're exhausted. And first of all, Achates, he strikes a spark from a flint, and he starts up a fire with leaves and tinder, and gave scattered around dry nourishment, kindling, and he caught the flame in the tinder. Okay, so he started a fire. Then the men, exhausted from their events, i.e. the storm, Juno trying to kill them, they prepare their grain. And so kerem here is the grain, which had been spoiled by the waters. And they prepare the tools for preparing the grain, and they prepare to roast the grain that they had recovered with the flames and to grind it with stone. So they're like going through their sacks. They're like, this is soaked. This is shot through. They're going through barrels with gypsum on it. And they're like, this one got cracked. It let water in. But here's some that actually works. Meanwhile, Aeneas climbs the cliff, seeks everything with his view of the sea far and wide. Okay. In the hope that he could see any sign of Aeneas, right, who had been tossed by the wind, and the Phrygian biremes. Okay, Phrygian is, did they give you the note there in my version? Yep, Phrygian, another word for Trojan. Okay, and the Phrygian biremes, that's two decks of oars. So see if he can see that. Or Capys, or the weapons of Caicus on the high prows. He sees no ship in sight, but he does see 3 stags wandering on the shore. Entire herds are following them from the rear, and long lines are grazing through the valleys. So it's just like food on a hoof. He stands here, took up position here, and snatched with his hand the bow and his swift arrows, the weapons which loyal Achates was carrying with him. So Achates started a fire, then Aeneas is like, Achates, let's go. And first he fells the leaders of the herds themselves, whose heads they were holding up lofty with tree-like antlers. And then he drives the herd into confusion, and the entire crowd, driving them with his weapons amongst the leafy groves. So he's hunting. Nor does he stop before, as a victor, he lays low 7 huge bodies on the ground to match their number with the number of ships he's got. From here, he seeks the port, and he divides the spoils amongst all his companions. He passes around the wine which the good hero Acestes had at that time. This is wine that he got probably from Sicily. Had at that time loaded in jars on the Sicilian shores. So yeah, he had given them as they were departing. Okay, so they see Acestes, and he's like, "Hey, take this wine with you." It's funny what I remember and what I remember having told you, not having told you, what I remember reading, what I'm like, oh, let me predict this thing that is, oh, right, the very next line. He, Aeneas, soothes the grieving hearts of his men with the following words. He says, "Oh, fellas, oh, companions, for we are not ignorant of prior troubles. Oh, you men who have suffered more severe things, the God will give a limit to this too. You have both approached the Sicilian rage." Okay, and I think there's a note on that, right? Line 200. Yeah, there's types of dogs. I forget that part because the next part's more fun. You've approached the Sicilian rage and the deeply resounding cliffs. You have experienced the Cyclopean rocks. In other words, Polyphemus threw rocks at them too. Call back your minds and send away your powerful fears. Or no, not powerful. Sorrowful. Tear-soaked fears. Tears for fears. Perhaps at some time it will be pleasing to even remember these things. There it is, right for the kingdom of Troy. And he's like pointing. He's like, there, it is right for the kingdom of Troy to rise again at that time when you'll be remembering these things so fondly. And I like to think that he's accidentally pointing toward Italy. Endure and save yourselves for more favorable conditions. And he says these things, or he says such things with his voice. And even though he is sick with enormous worries, he's battered down with enormous cares, he pretends hope on his face. He presses the grief deep down inside his heart. So this is all about the kind of leader that Aeneas is. Okay. Now, what I want you to do is to read from 210 all the way to 417. Summarize what you've read. Who does what to whom? Where do they do it? I'm going to hit the button.